Welcome to the Business Day SME Matters in partnership with Nedbank. Over the last several years, SMEs in South Africa have faced unprecedented challenges surrounding their businesses and the response to COVID-19 pandemic. From using the best technology tools in developing your business models to gaining insights on your customers and managing digital payments, valuable advice and practical examples of how you can gain insights that will help you achieve your small business goals is priceless. Welcome to our live audience as well as our online viewers joining us remotely. We welcome all questions to the panel by using the live chat function for our online viewers or asking our panelists from the live audience. When I open up the questions, a roving mic will be going through to you and you can ask your questions. My name is Mami Mtembu Fox, and today I will be speaking to South African business leaders and technology experts on how they have responded to technology best practices and positioning themselves for future growth. So firstly, I would like to ask Marcy some questions. And before we do that, I'd like to introduce our panelists that we have today. We've got our tech expert, founder and CEO of Furaha Africa Holdings, Matsi Modise, Ellen Shannon. And Ellen Shannon is the executive of small business services and private clients at Nedbank. And lastly, we've got Terry Bellum, who heads up design and group technology at Nedbank. Matsi, I would like to start with you. You are an expert as far as scaling and using technology in your business. What I'd like to find out from you is, what does going digital mean to you and your organization?
Thank you very much, and it's just such a privilege being here this morning, and everybody that's online, we wish you were here. So I wouldn't call myself an expert, I'm a practical person, right? And I think going digital, digitizing your business processes is like breathing in air. If you don't do it, you'll suffocate or you might just die. It's a way of doing business, and gone are the days of brick and mortar functions where you have to be in office to engage with your team, where you have to be in an office to engage with your suppliers and your accountant. These days you can do it online. I literally run my business from anywhere in the world when I'm traveling. It is possible for me to be able to engage with my team. So technology has enabled us to be able to be functional, whether it is using financial tools to manage your finances, whether it's using marketing tools, most of which are free. And also operationally, the things that help you move one thing to another, engage with your team, and manage your business. So everything tends to be in your palm of your hands these days if you use technology properly.
Fantastic. I would say that makes you an expert, wouldn't you say?
Well,
it does. And the fact that you don't think you're one makes you. So what are the obstacles, Ellen? What are the obstacles to digital transformation in any organization?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously, as a bank, been on quite an intensive digital journey ourselves, so I think we've had quite a lot of experience with this. Obviously, you need to consider the competition. You know, some of the competition are actually entering into our environment or into our sector with purely digital type of capability, whereas we've sort of coming from a point of having had largely physical representation as a banking institution, moving into a very strong digital strategy. So you've got to consider the competition. You also have to find the technology that works. I mean, there's a lot of technology out there. Finding the technology that's going to work for you can be an obstacle, because I think there's lots available. And I think the other, perhaps, obstacle which certainly we as an organization have had to overcome, which I sense would be true for any other organization that's coming from a point where they have not adopted digital in the past, is getting the internal mindset right. So, you know, some of your resources or people working within your organizations may even feel threatened by digital, where in fact digital becomes a massive enabler, not just for you as a business, but for them as individuals or resources working within your business. So I think, you know, getting the internal mindset can be an obstacle that many businesses need to overcome as well. There's a couple.
But in your view, from what you've seen, are SMEs falling behind as far as adapting to technology based on the answer that you've just given previously?
it's interesting because I think, and my colleagues may have different perspectives on this, but we see, in fact, Matsi and I were involved in a different sort of sponsorship earlier this year, where you're encountering certain small businesses who are actually at the forefront of technology. See, these are guys that are sort of innovating, using digital platforms to enable them to do exactly that. So you've got them at the forefront, and then you've got other small businesses that I think are lagging. Specifically in the e-commerce side of things, because I think e-commerce has become, certainly not the exclusive, because small businesses are certainly making use of it, but I think the e-commerce drive has been led by big business. So in that respect, I think small businesses, and I know this is a generalization, but I think have got lots of catching up to do. Other technologies that help make businesses more efficient. Also, I think small businesses lag relative to big business, but there's reasons for that. So it's not being critical. I think there's practicalities involved in you getting technology into your business and using it to sort of make your business more efficient, etc. That I think has caused small businesses perhaps lag in some respects. But like I say, in other respects, they're actually leading in terms of technology innovation.
Yeah, and it's quite easy, isn't it? I think a lot of people are not quite sure if it's easy or not. So it's great to have you guys to guide us on that. So designing scalable digital business models for small businesses, how would these help them achieve their goals and be successful? This is for you, Terry.
Sure. I mean, the first thing is don't freak out. Tech is not such a big challenge. It's also got to be relevant to what you're trying to accomplish with your business. So you'll find that there's the sort of managing a business, and then there's the sort of execution of that business. And I think with certainly in the small business space, small business owners should try and take advantage of many of the tools that are out there, and in many cases they're just for free, to manage the business. And then depending what you're doing, if you're in the logistics business, you might be running a small business at a home. Technology is there to enable the execution or delivery of that, and they're quite separate things. I think what's important to note is that many of the challenges small businesses stare down every day have been overcome by a variety of different tech companies and tech platforms, and not sort of big organizations, but not complex technology. I mean, there are many offerings from, and we're probably using them already, like Google provides a suite of services, more or less for free, that can help any small business owner manage their business. And then there are other big tech firms like Amazon or Amazon Web Services and Microsoft that have all sorts of different suites of software, very easy to use, that can help you manage and then execute on your business. So I think one of the key things, the going in position I often talk to, so before I kind of worked for Nedbank, I was kind of a serial small business owner. And we would run all of the management side of our business all out of the cloud. So in other words, we never kept anything on a laptop or a desktop because we were always terrified, it would break or it would fall down or, God forbid, it got stolen. So we would all keep it in sort of, in the cloud instead of on Google Drives and all these other tools that, if you're using Gmail, by the way, you have access to all these other things for free. They're in that suite of software. So I think there's a huge amount that's out there that can make it scalable. But I think that first stage is often a scary one. I've got stuff in a shoebox, or I've got it in my cupboard, or I have it on my physical laptop. Getting all that information into a digital format, I think, is the first big step. Once you're there, it's really easy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are also worried about focusing on the core parts of their business. And as you said, it is quite scary when you think about technology, when you're not necessarily a tech person. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Marcy, because you have done this. So how does digitalization add value to businesses from an operational perspective to marketing to finance? How do you put it all together?
So that it's not a scary concept, you're doing it already, right? From the minute you wake up, your alarm goes off. That's a digital tool that gets you up and going. From the minute you wake up, you have to now look at your diary. What am I going to do today? So for businesses, just think of, I am probably already utilizing this technology already, but how do I then now zone into, for my own business, what can I do operationally? Terry made reference to Google, which is free, right? So managing your documents at Google Drive. managing, getting a software that is able to help you with your HR. Like how I manage my HR is I use Workday. So when my employees have to file in a form for going on leave, there's lots of practical tools. For example, there's Google Forms when I do my questionnaires, Trello for managing my team tasks, so that I don't necessarily have to be on a call with each and every of my employees. I can literally go on Trello. There is Evernote, which is what I'm using now to actually make notes for this particular panel. There's Doodle, when I have to manage different people's diaries. And then finances, there's Xero, there is Sage. I think a lot of people are familiar with Sage. So in terms of managing your accounting, invoicing your clients, F&B online, that's how I do my day-to-day transactions and investments. And then marketing, guess what? Social media. You probably already have a Facebook account. You probably are hopefully not on TikTok, but maybe Instagram. So how do you utilize that as a way of engaging with your clients? I had a chat earlier on with a gentleman who's in one of the business owners. His name is May, and he told me that he's in property. And he told me that he does have a website, which means that he has a digital platform to promote his business. He's on Property 24. And on his social media, he does have Instagram and Facebook. But I asked him, do you then are you talking to a specific clientele on Instagram? Because you can't just have an Instagram account. Your account has to appeal to people that can actually afford to buy property. So make sure that you are intentional about those tools that do exist. They are free, but make it very targeted. So there is a whole array of free tools that are out there, and you can utilize them, but be very specific as to who you're speaking to, why am I using this? And it does actually create efficiency. I could be right here, but my business is running because my team knows what tasks they have to do because I put it on Trello. And by the end of the day, I'm going to look back and say, okay, did you guys achieve this? What are the queries that you have, etc. So use technology to advantage. It's free most of the time, and it's quite easy and efficient. And there are consultants out there that can actually look at your business and say, right, operationally, because you're in this industry, these are the tools, this is how we help you implement them. It is out there, it is for you, it's literally in the palm of your hands.
Speaking of tools, all right, when it comes to banks, we all know Nedbank is the best bank, all right? So let's
By
get
the
that
way.
right. Nedbank is the best bank, all right? We're here because of Nedbank. Banks are typically associated to the finance and the funding function. You don't typically see banks creating tools for small businesses as far as tech is concerned. The regular entrepreneur doesn't think, oh, where can I find my business tools, and then go, okay, my bank will do it.
Yeah.
But here we are with Nedbank.
Yeah, we are.
Can I elaborate on that?
So a lot is happening in our industry and specifically within our own organization. So I guess a bank's core functions are around enabling payments in, payments out, funding, and if you're lucky enough to have accumulated a lot of cash, then of course we'll invest that for you too. But I think small businesses are perhaps more worried about the payments and funding side of things. And from a payments side of things, the world's changed. I mean, I was watching a program on TV the other night. It was a bit of a throwback to the 80s, and it's the first time I've seen one of those zip-zap machines for probably a couple of decades, but they did exist. And maybe some in the audience maybe have never seen them before, but they were part of our reality. And that's how we used to collect payments using cards. Nowadays, as we will all know, we can go to a retail outlet, we can tap our phone against a device, you can tap a phone against a phone, and so the payment mechanisms have evolved immensely, and it's really important from two perspectives. One, small businesses, I think, need to have the ability to take payment in a way that their customers want to make payment. And secondly, the technology that exists today with respect to payments actually gives you the functionality, or gives you a lot more deeper functionality than just making a payment. So if you've got up-to-date point-of-sale devices, as a matter of, for example, the bank, Nedbank at least, will be able to tell you certain things around what's happening within your business. When your peak periods are, because we can see when people are swiping most regularly. We can tell you what those clients' buying habits are like across other industries within your vicinity. And ultimately, we're going to be able to tell you as to whether, in fact, your shop front is set up in the right type of vicinity, and whether or not you could be capturing a lot more clients if you had a business that was maybe, I don't know, a kilometer to the east. So the payments environment is giving you data that can enable you to do a lot more with your business, to make your business more efficient and try and capture more business as well. Funding, from a funding point of view, small businesses are now able to access funding digitally, not just through banks, and this is something that's evolving within our industry. But the fintech market, I mean, that the very nature of what they do is providing funding through digital expertise. And then the other big pain point, I think, for small businesses, apart from funding, has been access to markets. Now, an organization like Nedbank has created a platform which some of you may be aware of called AVO. And AVO is an environment where we have accumulated, I think, Terry, you may have more up-to-date numbers than me, but last time I was informed it was in excess of 1.6 million customers. Small businesses can essentially set up shop in that type of environment for as little as 200 Rand a month and get access essentially to 1.6 million customers, which has got to be the type of proposition that you've got to take seriously. And it's not just AVO, of course. The same would be true through other platforms such as Takealot and Amazon. So I think these technologies are certainly being provided by a bank like Nedbank, and of course with some of the other players I've mentioned like Amazon and Takealot. You've got to take these things seriously because essentially they're giving you a sort of, I guess, a broader opportunity than perhaps what you might be realizing right now, and not necessarily at extreme cost. So, I mean, that's maybe a sense of what we're doing as financial institutions.
So what I'm hearing is it's a marketplace. You've got analytics already built in, because I mean, sometimes you find yourself looking at different platforms to get analytics. So are you saying that everything can be found directly at Nedbank in one single place?
Well, some of it is at Nedbank, and there's other players doing other things, you know. So I think that you have to explore what's available to you. And I think, you know, engaging with your bank, and if it's Nedbank, engaging with us to really understand what's available to you is an important thing to do, because these things are all designed to try and unlock value to you guys as entrepreneurs to sort of generate more value for your businesses.
Okay. I'm going to focus on you one more time because I can see that people are writing and they're like, yes, give us more information. So on designing scalable digital businesses, what I'd like to find out from you as well is the examples. You know, we hear you talking. I want you to dig a little bit deeper into the examples of what they can use, because I see our panelists, especially this table here, that we're trying to write down. So if you can give us a few of your top things that we should look at.
I wonder if Terry wants to maybe sort of come in on that question as well, and maybe you can just clarify. So the question you're saying is,
you know, you were talking about how your point of sale is all that the customer needs, or what they would need as a technology. So as far as what Nedbank has, what are the examples that you say, maybe the top three?
Okay, so I mean, I think the point of sale, of course, and that has a greater relevance, I guess, for small businesses that are in the retail side of things. So it may be a slightly narrow example, but I think many small businesses do find themselves in the retail sector. You know, what complements our point-of-sale devices is a program called Market Edge. And that's the capability by which we can tell you how customers' buying patterns or your customers' buying patterns look, because not only do we have the insight into what they're buying from you, but we have insights into what they're buying from people within the vicinity of your business. Now, we don't give away too much around who those businesses are and exactly what they're buying there, but it's going to give you a good sense as to, you know, your clients' buying patterns, which may help you sort of think differently around what you stock, when you stock it. It may help you understand what staff you have in your business at any point in time, because if the buying patterns through Market Edge suggest that you have a lull in activity through your shop front between the hours of 10 and 2, you know, that may have you thinking differently around sort of how you manage your shifts, whether you have people full-time, part-time, those type of things. So, you know, it's that type of tool that I guess is designed to try and help you think a little maybe more deeply about your business and the type of activity that's happening within your business, ultimately to help you run your business more efficiently, which I think is something small businesses ought to be after. Because it is a tough environment, as has been alluded to a little bit earlier on. So anything we can do to sort of eke out some level of additional efficiencies within our business, I think is a good thing. I mean, Matsi, also touched on one. The one thing we find with small businesses, specifically when they apply for funding, is their inability to present us with financial information. And it's a tough thing because banks, by their very nature, are fairly conservative. We work within sort of credit loss ratios of like up to 1%, which doesn't give us much room to write off funding that we've provided. So when you're operating in those type of margins, you obviously have to be conservative with how you go about lending your money. And one of the ways we go about assessing whether we can extend funding or not is by assessing someone's financial information. Now, small businesses, and forgive me for this, but in our experience, often are not in a great position to present us with the financial information that we want. The digital capability, and Matsi mentioned an organization called Xero. Now, Xero has an arrangement, for instance, with Nedbank that you don't need to do anything. Once the link has been set up between your Xero accounting system and Nedbank through a thing called API marketplace technology, there is feeds that happen naturally and seamlessly without you having to do a thing that feeds your accounting system out of your banking system, which helps you create financial statements, which is something we as banks are looking for, which is enabling for you as a small business, not only to help you get funding, to make sure you've also got your finger on the pulse of your own business to understand how you're performing. So that's another, I guess, example of the type of technology I'm referring to.
Xero with an X, not Z.
Yes.
Xero.
We'll get back again into some of the examples. But Terry, what about the opportunities? How do you assess the size of the opportunities in the market? What's changed since COVID?
So COVID has demonstratively changed the shape of the South African economy. Okay. We had let's say what's typically called a middle class of about 5.6 million people before COVID. That dropped to about 2.6, 2.9 million after COVID. So it's almost like a 45% loss. You can imagine sort of, people are out there buying cars, buying houses, buying fridges, furniture, that sort of segment of society that's sort of consuming from the malls and the bigger shops. That's dropped dramatically. We've also seen a lot of people fall back out of the middle class into typically what's called the mass market, and then a lot of people fall into poverty. So and because South Africa is an emerging economy, the size and shape of our market changes the whole time. And as an entrepreneur and as a small business owner, you have to be sensitive to those things. So it's not static. It's not going to remain, the market you're serving is never going to remain the same. It's always growing and it's always shrinking. What that means is that, from an entrepreneurial point of view, you always have to be mindful of what's coming or what's happening and looking for new opportunities. So maybe you were selling kind of upmarket furniture. And well, maybe you've got to scale that back a little bit and look at other revenue streams and other revenue lines that are more matched to the size of the economy. It's also got a lot to do with market sizing. It's also got to do a lot with the type of industry and the type of business. So I'll give you an example. You could have gone to Harvard and Stanford and have a PhD in rocket science, and you're going to open a restaurant. There's still a 2 in 3 chance you're going to fail because that category, is a very difficult category to succeed in. So if you're in the restaurant trade and you're here and you're successful, congratulations, you're one of the minority of people that know how to make a restaurant work. Equally so, you can open other businesses in other categories in the food supply area, in soft drinks, and that market can just absorb a lot more entrance into the category. So you have to be very mindful of the category you're going into. And Mummy, one of the challenges is, and it's a human thing, we all fall in love with our own ideas. So we all get very passionate about an idea that we have. It doesn't mean that a good idea is going to translate into a viable business proposition. They're very different things. So we kind of like separate those things out. So it's important to have original ideas and potentially good ones, but you really have to seek the counsel of others, friends, do your research online, and really assess, is this a viable opportunity? In other words, is there a sufficient market size in maybe the community that I'm serving to absorb the business that I'm putting out there? And I'll give you an example. And maybe just to pick up on one of the the tools that Alan was talking about. So Alan spoke about sort of like, Nedbank tools that we can use, and those are quite important ones. Maybe talk about other tools. So very, very simple. Where do most searches nowadays for a product or service start? They start on Google. So most people just go to a search engine and you'll type in the word plumber. So let's say you're a plumber or you are some form of small business. Firstly, you need to be present. And by the way, having a website doesn't get you there. So the first thing I would often say to any small business owner, go register with Google My Business. What does that do? You ever see when you kind of click and you said maybe Google the word plumber, and you see those little sort of red dots that pop up that tell you where the closest plumber is? All that business owner did was registered on Google My Business. They said, this is the name of my business, here's my address, here's my opening hours, and here's what I do. So if you're not there, then no one's going to find you. And having a website is good, but it's not necessarily geared to search. So the most important thing digitally in your lives needs to be search. How do people find me quickly? And that's often geotagged, so it's in other words geographically relevant. So let's say I'm in Deep Kloof, Soweto. I am a repair shop for electronics. The first thing you're going to do is repair my phone, if that's the query that you have. If you are within a 5, 10, 15 kilometer radius of the query, you're going to pop up. So in other words, they'll know that you're there. So maybe tie that back into market sizing. If you're thinking of entering a category, the first thing you should do is go out there and type in the category you're interested in. So maybe you want to open a shop fitting business, or you want to open a bakery. Type in bakery. See how many bakeries pop up close to you. If there's a lot, maybe you need to think about something else, or targeting your business physically somewhere else. So there's a lot of, when we talk about analytics, it sounds like you need sort of a lot of people with degrees and stuff to provide that. You don't. You can do it yourselves. So just like we talk about common sense. So common sense solutions. Go find out who's out there that's competing with you. And are you present in that market? In other words, have you got a sort of physical presence? And you don't have to have a physical presence. Have you got a digital presence? And you can leverage that to your advantage. So the key thing is, if you are looking at maybe starting a new revenue stream or growing your existing revenue stream, how do people find you? Make it easy for them. And often, the other question is, should I build an app? The answer is no, you shouldn't. Unless you are a fairly decent-sized business with a very specific offering, spending the time, effort, and money to go build an app is expensive, because you've got to build them, in some cases, twice. What do we mean by twice? You've got to build it for an Android phone, for a Samsung, a Huawei, but you've also got to build it for Apple phones. So that's you doubling the cost. And in most cases, apps don't exist in the web. They exist on app stores. So it's very difficult to find them. So you can do all of this, using those tools that we were all talking about, using free tools that are out there. They're geared to make you successful. If you're not successful, they're not successful. Facebook Marketplace, great way to reach people within 1, 2, 3 degrees of separation of where you are. Google My Business, great way to show the world where you are and what you do. Put your reviews up. So there's some really interesting sort of, again, free tools that small, medium, and in some cases large businesses are not using, that you can use to promote your business, let people know where you are, get ratings, and get referrals. And that's just on the sort of like the promotional side of your business. And then on the delivery side, the executional side, there are also multiple technologies that you can use. My favorite is actually just WhatsApp Business.
Yeah.
It's just a simple platform to get messaging out. I've got some friends of mine that my brother-in-law lives in Dubai, and he is starting up a chicken business. And he just runs it off of Uber Eats doesn't go to where he is, so he sees that as an advantage, not a disadvantage. So he just talks to a couple of couriers in his area of motorcycles, and he's hooked up a very small business where he just does the whole thing via WhatsApp. So people order via WhatsApp, he lets the courier know, or the guy with the bike know, or sometimes just the guy with the bicycle to come and fetch it, and he runs a very successful small business off of a very simple platform.
Wow. Terry, all this information is fantastic. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. It's wonderful. It sounds great. where do the opportunities lie? Give us the scoop, you know. You know, you've given us the information, you know, don't fall in love with your idea, and somebody's sitting there going, okay, I'm not falling in love with your idea, but Terry seems to know a lot of stuff. Terry, give us the scoop. Where are the opportunities?
Sure. So if you're talking about, so we're talking about what categories opportunity exists in today. Okay. So you've got what's called under-traded categories and over-traded categories. So an over-traded category is somewhere where you would see dozens of existing businesses already there, and you might think, I want to go there. Well, maybe if you're going to do that, you have to think about it in a fresh way. So what am I going to do differently to what existing businesses are doing in order for me to compete in that area? But there's other areas that are quite, I think, you're on the rise. So maybe go through one or two, because I think that's what you're looking for.
Yes.
All right. So education. Education is a huge growth vector, both domestically and across the continent. Why? I mean, the average, I'll tell you a horrible statistic. In Japan, there are more nappies sold for old people than there are for children, because it's got an aging population. On the continent of Africa, the median age of a young person is 17. So you take 1 billion people, and median being roughly half, so about 500 million people are under the age of 17, and they are being educated. That applies also into South Africa. And in the South African system, our public educational system is quite challenged. So that creates lots of opportunities for entrepreneurs in providing support in what we used to call, we were growing up, grinds. So maths, science support. You can absolutely go find yourself, you will all know students who are in college. You can pull them together and focus them in your particular community to provide support for young kids who need to learn those really hardcore subjects and maybe need a bit of support outside of school. So after school support is a huge growth area. So where I live, I predominantly live in Cape Town, I cannot find right now someone to come and support my kids with extra maths in the time that I want. I can't find it because there's no easy way for me to do it. So education is a huge growth area. After school care is a huge growth area. So being able to responsibly and from an efficacy point of view, look after children who are finished in school between the hours around 2 and 5 when the parents are still working. And what do they want to do? They want to make sure that the child is there, the child is safe, well looked after, stimulated, so not watching Netflix, and maybe fed. And you can charge for that service because that allows the parents to finish their working day, to transport themselves home, and then not have to stress about all the other things they're supposed to be doing as parents. So education is a huge growth area. I think healthcare as well, in a variety of different sectors. I think the other key thing is in logistics. So if we think about being able to provide logistical services in areas for small packages where maybe sort of the classical big guys don't go. There's a whole, South Africa is a big country. There are huge areas where big firms like Uber Eats, Uber Delivery just don't go.
Yeah.
So why not do that locally? There is always packages being transported to and from businesses to homes in the locations, but it's often down to the person to go fetch it, but again, also sometimes down to the shop to organize delivery. And everybody's busy, everybody's on the hustle, everybody's trying to make money. So they don't have time for those things. So there's no reason that you can't, what we call sort of, create a micro market, a small market in your respective area. And the way South Africa is designed, it's got very low density, but also very high density. So in those high density areas, there's lots of opportunity to provide a lot of those services for people who have left their homes during the day, to in many cases, the way that, South Africa was structured during apartheid, to travel to the cities to earn an income. It doesn't mean that there's no economic activity back there after the fact. It's just not being serviced correctly. So I think those are maybe, we can go on for this for a long time, but those are maybe just two areas that I think are worth investigating.
Very valuable information. And speaking of opportunities, Matsi, you're actually in this space as far as education is concerned, or rather training and all of that. How do you see the role of SMEs evolving? How has it evolved?
They're the lifeblood of our economy. let's just be honest. They're the ones that are going to contribute towards our economy. They're the ones that are supposed to pay their taxes. They're the ones that are supposed to create jobs. So the SME sector is critical. It's very, very important. And I think to touch on what Terry said, is they have to be fit for purpose, right? So industries that were relevant 15, 20 years ago have probably failed to exist. So how do we become fit for purpose as small businesses? I also like what Terry said around being in love with our own ideas. It's great to have an idea, but do you have a market that demands this? Do you have a market that's willing to pay 1 cent, 1 rand, 10 rands towards what you're selling? So we do play a very, very big role. And also, you don't want to be a small business forever. I mean, I don't wake up in the morning to just be an SME. The idea is to grow. And I like banks like Nedbank because they are here for you as you are a small business. They're here for you as you have an idea and also as you're expanding and growing. So I think it's important that you see yourself as a value-adding citizen every morning, opening a shop, employing people, giving people a service, solving a solution, or creating a solution for a problem. And South Africa definitely needs to have more and more different ideas, but that are fit for purpose. We mustn't do the nami ngiyafuna or I'm also going to do that, because there's too many of us doing, I won't name and shame or say like there's people that do this but that, but just think out of the box. Think of how am I going to be a painkiller to a pain that a society has. Be that tablet that everybody has to drink so that it does, ease that pain. And, I just think of, I always do numbers in my head, right? So Alan said there is 1.6 million people that are paying 200 rands for a platform. Do the numbers. A month, right? So when you think of a business idea, think of something that can easily scale. And he says it's growing every day. So now it's maybe next month is going to be 1.8 million people on a platform that pay 200 rands per month. So think of such ideas. Practical, scalable, and the best way to do that is to apply innovation, is to apply technology, because tech is there for scale and efficiency.
And how do you run your business?
How do I?
Give us an example
Of?
of how, this makes so much sense, but I think we're also interested in how you run your business. Can you give us an example of the different technologies that you use for your own business and how you have scaled? You just said that you don't want to remain a small business forever. I think everybody here doesn't want to remain a small business forever.
Same WhatsApp group, I'm glad.
Yeah, so how do you scale?
Sure. So my company does skills training, and then also we do skills technology. So traditionally, when I started, I did the skills training. So we'd do learnerships, short learning courses. Our clients are primarily big corporates that have to spend on skills development. So it's an allocation every year they have to spend on skills development. And I have solutions to provide them. So when I started, I did that. And it's boring, it's traditional, everybody's doing it. But then now, since COVID, we introduced a skills technology. We do learner management systems. So if you have employees and they have to study, they have to learn, that you have to map where they are in terms of their skills and competencies, we provide a platform that does that disseminates content. And also we do skills gaps analysis. So if you have an employee base of, let's say, 1,000 employees, at any point in time, at a click of a button, you'll be able to know who everybody is, what their skills levels are, map and plan what their skills, where you want to take them in terms of upskilling, reskilling them. And then there is data at a click of a button where it does analytics around what are the gaps, where are the shortages. And also we're able to have APIs that plug into our platforms so that as an HR manager, you're able to literally have an ecosystem of learning and a community of learning. So that's one. And how then that scales is we make money by having, when somebody says I have 20 employees, it doesn't excite me. When somebody says I have 20,000 employees, that excites me. So the more employees we have on our platforms, the more we make money, because we charge per employee on the platform, and we give different services for whatever it is, whether it's a skills gap analysis tool, or we also have, let's say, a once-off fee of creating that learner management system for them, and then getting all the employees there and getting the manager to be able, at a click of a button, have a sense of what's happening across the board. if you're in South Africa or if you're in Johannesburg, but you have employees in Pretoria, Cape Town, you are able to engage, manage, and upskill and reskill them.
And
So that's a practical example of how my company runs.
you mentioned earlier that you could be here and your company is still running in the background, and that creates efficiency. And I suppose with that you can scale a little bit faster if you are more efficient, of course. And you can't really speak to your corporate if you're not efficient, and that is helping you scale. But now, coming back to you, Alan, you said you want the numbers, right? And SMEs are not always able to have the numbers that you're looking for. How do we make sure as SMEs that we have cash flow security?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to come to. I just want to touch on something Matsi said,
Yeah.
because I'm worried that maybe I know this is Business Day TV, there may be some analysts trying to sort of do the Avo numbers. So we've got 1.6 million buyers in there. There's many thousands of suppliers. It's suppliers that pay the 200 Rand a month fee. So I just wanted to set that record straight. But on the point around cash flow security, so I'm actually not sure there is such a thing as cash flow security, to be honest with you. I think we've all been exposed to black swan events in recent times, and by that I mean the big events that impact all of us, like COVID, the war in Ukraine, etc., etc. And I think those have all been sort of tests, I guess, on our cash flow. I think cash flow is the one thing that, in my own experience, I've seen as being the maker or breaker of businesses. We have seen many businesses on paper demonstrate that they can make a profit, but they don't actually have the cash flow to sustain themselves. And that's because they are tempted into growth. Now, we all want to grow, but you've got to grow within yourself unless you're getting other forms of cash in the form of investment into your business that enable you to sort of participate in that growth. So I think we can optimize and enhance cash flow, but I don't think we can ultimately secure it, to be honest with you. And we've all, like I said, had experience of that over the last couple of years with everything going on, the strain on our cash flow. So my advice would be to enhance your cash flow or to use it responsibly, grow within yourself, unless you're attracting some large investment that is being plowed into your business specifically for the purposes of helping you growth outside of the range at which you would ordinarily be able to do. As banks, our role is to support you in funding that growth, and there's a point to which we can assist, and then we start hitting this thing called gearing, which you'll hear banks talk about, which is where you end up potentially becoming over-borrowed relative to what you yourself have put into your business. So reach out to your bank, reach out to us, and we'll help facilitate your cash flow and your growth as best as possible. Other cash flow enhancement techniques is using your own, I guess, working capital cycle. So, lean on your suppliers, collect earlier from those people owing you money. Those, I guess, are obvious things that you're already familiar with. But I think the notion of cash flow security is potentially a myth, but you can use your cash flow very responsibly. Don't use short-term money to buy medium and long-term assets in your business, because that's going to cause problems for you down the line, unless, of course, you are blessed with an abundance of cash flow that you actually not quite sure what to do with it. But I know that's not the case for most small businesses out there.
Fantastic. Now, I have a question for all three of you, and this is around SME challenges. You've spoken about cash flow and funding being a problem. Now, I'll start with you, Terry. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've noticed as far as SMEs are concerned that you have encountered, not only in Nedbank, but just from viewing it?
I think curiosity. So spending enough time reflecting on the business. So what are my blind spots? What's missing? How can I fulfill, how can I close those gaps? I think many businesses in South Africa we're in an economically challenged time. There's always going to be things you can do to promote your business, to grow your business. But that's not going to happen if you're in the business. So there's working in the business and there's working on the business. And it doesn't matter how big or small the business is. 1 employee, 2 employees, 100, 1,000. You sometimes need to find time for yourself to step out of the business and work on the business and start to think about, is it sustainable? how can I grow it? How can I get it out there? How can I promote it better? Maybe coming to events like this, and talking to other people who are facing similar challenges. I think we don't do enough to support each other in the small business space to grow. So my sense would be carve out some time every month to step away from your business, to observe where it is, to be mindful of the challenges, and then seek to solve those challenges. So you're always going to be, a couple of moves ahead on the chessboard.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where technology comes in, really, because you wouldn't have to be so involved if you have tools that can assist you, as you were saying earlier. So what are the challenges that you have seen?
I'm going to say something that's quite boring, but it's quite true. I think access to markets, it's bigger than access to funding. Because if you do not have a clientele, target segment that you sell to, you're not in business. So it is a big challenge because as you grow, you have to now take business away from people, unless you are crafting a new market segment that you're the only player. So reality is getting into big corporates, it's a challenge. I've tried to do that. I continue to try to do that every day. But access to markets is something that you have to be clear who is your target market, and also understand that it's a dog-eat-dog world. You're going to have to fight for your market share and be relentless about it. But also your value proposition, what makes you different. So if you're now having to get business from an already existing market, is what's going to make you unique. It's not your blackness. It's not your female being a female. So I must just put it out there because that's never my value proposition when I'm selling. So initially, yes, I had to carve a way out, but then I realized that technology, by having these tech platforms in the skill space, is what's going to make me different because I have people that offer training solutions, learnerships, they do that. I have people that do have different components of technology, but how do you create an ecosystem of learning for your client where they don't have to go everywhere? They come to you for everything because you've got access to content, access to learning solutions, and then on the other side, you have the ability to disseminate all of that within one place. So be unique. You have to have a unique selling proposition. So access to market, very, very big, very, very important, but you have to be different. You have to be unique.
Now, Ellen, thank you very much, Mansi. Ellen, before you answer the challenges, as soon as you're done answering, we have quite a few questions, some of them from our live audience and some from our online audience. So if you can just touch on the challenges that you've seen the most of, and then we'll take a few questions from you guys.
Yeah, so I'm 100% agree with Matsi. Access to funding, I think accessing funding may be the tricky part. Let me tell you, there's no shortage of funding available. There's billions of rands of funding available out there. The big challenge is being able to lend it to organizations or businesses that can demonstrate that they will be able to put it to good use and to use that money to essentially turn a profit and grow. But there's funding available. So I think for me, the point I made earlier around getting your own house in order and being able to present a case to those that are providing the funding is crucial. Access to markets, I believe, is the single biggest challenge, and that's where I think, and we've touched on some of the elements where technology can play a massive role. I do think you have to make the choice to embrace technology and embrace the digital capabilities that exist out there. I'll tell you this, if our organization didn't do so, as big as we are, we would fail to exist. In fact, we may already be failing to exist had we not made the choices that we made some years ago. And I think the same is true for all big business out there, to be honest with you. And the same has to be true for small business too. If you want to assure your own sustainability and future growth, I think you need to embrace these things. And I'm not just talking about the B2C or business to consumer side of things. Interesting number is e-commerce accounted for $5.5 trillion of activity, I think it was in 2020. Now that's about 15 times the entire South African GDP. And the most of it was B2C, but the B2B side is growing quite significantly. So I don't think it matters whether you're in retail or whether you're doing business with other businesses. You need to sort of embrace the technologies that exist to try and make sure that your business is not only sustainable and will exist in a couple of years' time, but is poised for growth.
Fantastic. We have quite a few questions for you. The first question is from our online audience, and this is coming from Monde. Monda says, how can we foster a culture of using or embracing technology by township and rural businesses? I think, Terry, you might be the best person to answer this one.
So I think the first thing is, the first challenge you have to overcome, irrespective of where you're located, is there's a connectivity challenge. So you have to be able to have decent bandwidth, whether that's 3G, 4G, and soon to be 5G, to be able to trade. I mean, I've got colleagues of mine who actually kind of run small businesses out of the bush. They're game rangers, and they're able to set up their infrastructure so they can still kind of talk and connect. I think if you're in a rural environment and you are far from, let's call it, traditional markets, then the focus should be on products and services that are unique to your community, to your area, that people will take an interest in. There's a beautiful business in Swaziland called Gone Rural that just makes the most amazing Zulu and Swazi artifacts, and they sell them worldwide because they built up a reputation over time in a very rural part of Swaziland. So so that's maybe talking about kind of some of the rural environments. Also, I think this idea of cooperative ownership, and from a business model point of view, it being able to sort of share ownership of manufacturing or of delivery or of logistic services amongst several individuals or several businesses. And then I think the technology play on top of the business model then becomes important, is to understand that technology is there, let's say if you're in the townships, to enable your business. You shouldn't be over-investing in it. Mm-hmm. You should be portioning, you should be wise as to what, every business in some way is a technology business. So there's technology companies who make tech and sell tech, that's a different thing. But even if you're a small business of 3 to 5 people, you should be able to think about, how do I enable my business with technology? And I think one of the big untapped markets from a technology deployment point of view in South Africa is the townships, because it's such a rich culture, it's densely populated, and there are so many underserviced markets in those areas, where like if there's a lobola ceremony and you want to get meat, or you want to get a cow, where do you go for that? Why isn't there an app for that? Or I'm not saying an app. Why is there not a website for that? Why is that not available on Facebook
Avo.
Marketplace or even on Avo? I mean, I think we'll go and talk to the Avo team about that. There's so many obvious things or categories that are undigitized and are very manual in context. So I would certainly advise, from a technology point of view, is to look at what those existing sort of sources of value are in your community and say, is there a way where some technology can play a role in making it better? And that then can be the differentiator for your organization.
Wonderful. One day, look at your current environment. That's where you should be going. We have another question now. This one is from Gifule to Nedbank. What is the best way to maintain the bank's business accounts while one awaits for bills to be paid into the company account? I think she's...
Yeah, I guess the challenge there sounds like it's a cash flow one.
Cash flow one.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess you can't obviously pay away money you don't have. So if it's just purely a timing thing, I think you'll find, certainly with an organization like ours, as long as we understand your cash flow and that your payments typically come in 2 weeks after your payments need to go out, then you need what they call a working capital facility, commonly known as an overdraft. And as banks, that's our role, is to help you sort of bridge that period of time between when your money comes in and when you need to make certain commitments yourself. Ideally, you want to try and manage the cash flow such that things happen the other way around, but banks exist to sort of provide that type of scenario when it's faced. Ultimately, you want to be generating enough margin and enough profit to be able to fund those things yourselves and generate positive cash flow. And I don't mean positive balances, I just mean you're generating more coming in versus what's going out. Okay. But an overdraft would be something that could, I think, resolve that fairly easily enough. Yeah. Obviously, there's costs associated with it, but it's not significant.
Fantastic. Overdraft. That's what we talk
about. It's not a nice term. We've got to find another way of
no, maybe we should
referring to
give
that
it
part,
a new name.
It's just got like negative connotations associated with it.
The negative balance, though.
Yeah, it is.
We've got some questions as well from our live audience. We have a roving mic going through. The gentleman in the blue shirt, and then the lady in beautiful green over here afterwards.
Hi, my name is Remo.
Hi, Remo.
Question to Ellen. My business bank account is currently with another bank, and normally the access as a small business, you get just access to your consultants that try to. So I've asked them over the years, but can't you give me more sophisticated, as you've explained, Ellen, type of services to access the markets better, etc., etc. And then they said, you need to have a turnover of 5 million rand per year, which I don't have. And so from a Nedbank side, obviously I'm not going to deal with an executive which so articulate as yourself, but how do I go about, or how do I access? Can I go and look on your website? So to look at, do proper research so that I can maybe move my accounts and have access to this?
Yeah. So thanks for the question. I mean, I think Nedbank's approach to small business has been that we allocate what we refer to as a dedicated relationship banker to every small business. So it doesn't matter whether you're starting up, generating 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 50 million rand per annum, you'll all have access to the same level of skill and resources. And their role is essentially to provide, and obviously to ask you questions, understanding more about your business and make sure that they're sort of setting you up with the right set of solutions to enable you to achieve whatever your aspirations for your business are, some of which would include some of the stuff that I've talked about here today. So turnover within Nedbank is not a parameter upon which we decide whether we allocate you that resource or not. You do get allocated that resource. Entering into a relationship with Nedbank can be done across the desk from someone face to face. So if you really want to sort of stare into the whites of their eyes and get that sort of face to face experience. Similarly, we've talked about digital. You could enter into the Nedbank as a small business through the digital equation, but of course, we talk about digital when you want it, human when you need it, and often you need that human interface because I'm not sure if you guys have had experience with things like chatbots. Oh. They do a job to a point, but then they don't go beyond that yet, and that's where I think the human interface becomes so valuable. Yeah.
Fantastic. The lady in green.
Hi, my name is Dimpo. The question is to Terry and Alan. So I just want to ask about the overdraft for the business. If it doesn't look negative or that you can't manage, your cash flow. And then to Terry, I'm in the ECD, the two examples that you made, ECD and logistics. And I'm sort of old school. I believe in the personal touch. So with the logistics, everybody's selling the tracking system. And personally, I don't believe in that. And that is the digital way of doing things. So I just want to ask for advice. How can I, go around it, or how to sell it or present it better to clients?
Should I go first? Mine's the easy one, I think. So overdraft's not a bad thing. It doesn't count negatively from a credit score point of view, as long as you operate within the overdraft limit. If you go in excess of the limit or you go into overdraft without the bank authorizing you to do so, that's when it'll count negatively from a credit score point of view and becomes news amongst the credit bureaus. But as long as it's within a limit, it can be a very useful tool and it's not a bad thing. Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful question because I think maybe to rephrase it for everybody is, so you have a logistics business and you're worried about maybe, if we kind of tip into the sort of digital side of it, losing the human touch to a certain extent. I think that should never happen. Technology should never take that away, because if that's a part of who you are and a part of your business, that has to remain, because that's what differentiates you from other people. So the tech should be there, and maybe some of the tracking systems are just there to make it more efficient and easier for you to manage what's going on. I think at the experience level, it's always nice to find some small, unique way just to let people know that you're there, that you care, that you see them. Maybe just give you some very simple examples. There's a South African company called Yuppie Chef. They used to sell kind of high-end kitchen equipment, and they were a very digital business. They just sold a couple of months ago and done quite well. And every time a package gets delivered, there's always a personal note on the package, acknowledging how this was packed by Terry, or this was packed by Umpo. Similarly, there's, in the part of Cape Town I'm in, there's a small business called Sealand. They make, bags and stuff from recycled goods. And every time they make something, the person who made it, their name is stitched into the bag. And they let you know who that person is when it gets delivered. So I had a beautiful, I do a lot of hiking, backpack, in fact, which I travel with today, made by Refilway. And I know Refilway made my backpack. I'm even intrigued to find out a little bit more who she is. So when I go to the factory, I can say hi. So don't. I think it's not an either or. It's an and. You can simplify and become much more efficient and take a lot of stress off your life by implementing some of these digital tools, which should give you more time to then dial up the human element and make it easier.
Yeah. Oh, lots of questions. Lots of questions. The lady here. Let's hear that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this platform and for the opportunity. I'm a Nedbank client, but I'll be starting my business soon, and I'm grateful for this platform. So I'm in health, and I would like to start something in health. I would just like to ask the panelists if they have any advice for someone starting something in health. I'm very new into business. I haven't even registered. So I'm a baby, probably more than anyone else in this room.
May I please ask that we shape that a little bit? When you say that you are in health, can you just elaborate a little bit so that your answer is more accurate?
So I'm a registered nurse by qualification. I specialized in nephrology, which is a study in kidneys. So I'm a nephrology nurse, and I did a BK in education and administration, which is education, like teaching nurses or training upcoming nurses. So that's what I've done.
So you basically, are you trying to be in the education space and the health space?
Yes.
You're like right in the middle of
Yes.
the best type of niches. So I think both of you can answer the question.
I'll take a stab, and it's something very relevant, current. I mean, I have a dad who's not doing too well. My parents separated when I was 10, so he lives by himself. And right now, I live in Johannesburg. He lives in Kwakwa, which is 300 kilometers from here. And as a family, we're saying we need somebody who's going to be able to be there, administer his health, make sure that he eats, make sure that mentally he's okay. So there's a huge gap for that for people that care for somebody who's like my dad. He doesn't want to go to hospice. He's got his own home. He likes the comfort of his own home. He doesn't want to go to hospital for too long unless he has to. So we are in desperate need for a healthcare practitioner who can administer his medication, make sure that he eats, and if there was an Uber for that, whereby there's a registration of nurses who have qualifications, and now we are looking for somebody in Kwakwa who can look after my dad. That would be a solution. I would subscribe today, right now, sign the check. That's an example. Yeah.
And that's a beautiful example. I mean, maybe to build on, I mean, nephrology is like you should be in the job market for a whole 5 seconds because those are rare skills. I'm going to go a little bit bigger because you're starting out. I think, think about this expansively. And I think from a South African point of view, we've got to think beyond the borders of South Africa. Because there are vast inequalities in how jobs are spread out across the whole world right now. Like in our industry, in the technology industry, there's 1.5 million jobs in North America that cannot be filled right now. We've massive youth unemployment in South Africa. In healthcare, if you look at countries across the world, some European countries, Japan's a good example, which have aging populations, the biggest challenge their societies are staring down in the next decade or 2 decades is how do I care for the elderly? So, if I'm a young entrepreneur and I have a nursing background, I'd be on an airplane to Japan tomorrow to figure that market. I'd be coming back to South Africa. I'd be identifying, 100 or possibly 1,000 young, educated, smart, caring human beings who I could then create a business around, and I can then get them working in different parts of the world. And they'll earn hard currency in yen and in dollars, and they can bring that value back. The same would apply if I was just a waiter, or I was in the hospitality industry. Like in where I'm from, which is Ireland, this summer, or they just had the summer, but next summer they can't fill the jobs.
May I interrupt you for a little bit, Terry? This conversation is so good. We wanted it to go on forever and ever. For our online guys, we're going to stop this session, but the rest of you, we can carry on for a little bit for the questions. Thank you so much for joining us at the Business Day SME Matters in partnership with Nedbank. We hope you find the conversation interesting and insightful. And, you know, if this proves anything at all, is that Nedbank is on fire. Look at how everybody just wants to carry on with this conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I think, Terry, if you don't mind.